know when you're good to go. Excellent. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the planning board. Let's start by saluting the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. It's the regular monthly meeting of the planning board. Today is Tuesday, May 27th. It's a couple minutes after 5 p.m. And we'll call this to order. I'll take a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting, which was Tuesday, April 22. People had a chance to look at that.
Second.
So thank you. That was Susan and then seconded by Grania. All those in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you. I'm going to take things slightly out of order here just to get this done. So the very last item, which is old business, 63 Main Street, is a request, is Page Restaurant, a request to adjourn. We're going, let's deal with that first. I'd like to adjourn it, but we won't take it up until further notice, as opposed to having it on the agenda each month. Thank you, Tiffany. When they've done what they need to do, they'll come back.
They'll come back and we'll go on the agenda.
It's cleaner that way. So I'll take a motion to do that. Thank you, Grania. Thank you, Larry, for seconding that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Wonderful. Thank you. Correspondence requiring action, which is 3, and then number 1, 2 Main Street and 22 Long Island Avenue. Site plan application of, to consider secret lead agency responsibility. We've already done secret review, or secret, not review, but coordination. That's the word. And we could tonight, I think, Kathy, assume lead agency if we wanted to. Right.
With the caveat that we don't have enough information to actually do the secret review of the project until we have more information.
Okay, so it's an incomplete application for secret review, but we can assume lead agency. Okay, and we have a resolution to that effect.
Yes, this one. You have that in front of you?
Yes, I do. Yep. Folks, I'm assuming, anyone have any questions about that, what we're doing tonight? We won't begin discussing it, but we can assume lead agency and just have that done.
Right.
And then when they complete their application, then we can begin the secret process.
Yep.
Good. So I'll accept the motion to adopt the resolution. Thank you, Drew.
Second.
And second by Larry. All those in favor of
All right.
adopting?
Aye.
That is unanimous. Thank you. Okay, work session. 311 Madison Street. I believe that was a request to adjourn. Is that right? There is a pre-submission conference report which was
Right.
sent out, and we've all seen that. But we will consider that maybe at next month's meeting, since they've requested an adjournment. So I'll need a motion to adjourn till next month.
This is the applicant's request for the adjournment.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
So moved. Second.
Thank you, Susan and Grania. All those in favor of adjourning till next month?
Aye.
Good. It's unanimous.
The next meeting is June 24th.
Thank you. June 24th is the next meeting. 63 Terry Drive. This comes back. It's been several months since we've seen that. It's a lot line modification. We will not be discussing that tonight. We've all seen some of the paperwork that came through recently. But we can schedule a public hearing for that for next month. And so if that's in line with what people would like to do, I'd consider a motion for that.
So moved.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Drew. All those in favor of scheduling public hearing for next month, Tuesday, June 24th.
Aye. Aye.
Unanimous. Okay, excellent. Okay. We're now on to the continued public hearing for 11 Bridge Street. Susan, lovely having you here.
Where
Susan Seal will be recusing herself going forward on this this application. For those of you who aren't familiar, when you recuse, you remove yourself from the room. So we're letting her do that.
Bye,
So long,
Susan.
thank you. Okay, this is a public hearing. Liz, I believe we kept it open, so we don't need to open it again. It's an open public hearing, continued from last month. We heard from several people last month. Tiffany, did you want to say anything to this at this time? Tiffany Scarlato, who's the attorney for the applicant. So we've heard from a lot of people who spoke. We've also received multiple letters or emails. If anyone would like to speak now to this application, they're welcome to come to the podium and speak. So come on up, and I'll need you to identify yourself, your name and where you live. And just keep in mind that the speaker's above your head, so just speak. Hello.
Richard O'Brien, 18 Branch Street. I would like to address the issues of fair DEIS conversation in regards to parking, in regards to 711 Bridge Street. And I made a copy of Google Maps that I was going to address about parking and the traffic study that was done from the DEIS.
Okay,
Could I hand them out?
sure, please.
Just to get a better idea of what I'm talking about.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Here's an extra.
The blue on that map is where the automatic traffic recorders were placed. Now we're going into detail about the red. According to the DEIS report, Roman numeral page 9 and 10, automatic traffic recorders were placed at the following locations 1 week in August and September 2022. The first one was at Rose Street, east of Bridge Street. The second one was at Bridge Street, north of Rose Street. And the third one was on Main Street, south of Glover Street. I recall when these automatic traffic recorders above number 1 and 2 were placed at these locations. One was placed approximately in front of 23 Bridge Street, north side only. Number 2 was placed on the same direction of the traffic flow in front of 7 Bridge Street, again, north side only. I remember thinking to myself how ridiculous it seemed to have 2 traffic monitoring stations placed on the north side of Bridge Street, traveling in the same northerly direction, approximately 100 feet apart. And I also recall that it seemed that in that time frame, it was after the summer season. The number 3 spot in that list, the automatic traffic recorder, from my understanding, was placed a half a mile away from 711 Bridge Street location. As far as I can understand, it's somewhere on Main Street near the Cove Deli. The DEIS report needs to accurately report and document all true traffic counts in the DEIS analysis. Automatic traffic recorders should be placed in both directions, north and south on Bridge Street, beginning from Long Island Avenue, as well as accurate traffic counts on the north and south of Bridge Street and Rose Street for a fair and honest evaluation of traffic problems in the neighborhood. The automatic traffic recorders should have been installed during the summer season and would have included at least 1 weekend in that period. In addition, the DEIS should have taken into consideration placing automatic traffic recorders placed in both the entry and exit into the parking lot at 5 Bridge Street. If you notice that on the map.
Yep.
On the north side of the Bridge Street, this would give an accurate and honest evaluation to the parking problem in our neighborhood.
Okay.
Finally, I'd like to say on the report, Roman numeral page 9, the visual resources section. They call it a line of sight. I would like to refer to it as a line of obstructed sight. The line of obstructed sight analysis was performed and the visibility of the proposed development would be to the immediate area of Bridge Street, Harbor Close condos, Meadow Street, Nassau Street, and North Long Island Avenue of South Spring Street. I was wondering if it also took into consideration the third floor that they wish to add to this, and also the HVACs that were going to be on top of that for their line of sight analysis. Finally, I just would like to say that if this report is this flawed for something so simple as a traffic report, I can only imagine what the other 300 pages would include. That's to a layperson, I can't get into it. And I would like to ask that at this point, if you can, to reject this DEIS report just based on this traffic analysis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Please come on up to the podium if you have anyone who would like to speak. Hi.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jen Hartnagel and I'm here representing Group for the East End. For those of you not familiar with the group, we're a 501c3 nonprofit environmental advocacy organization. We serve. Are they not here? No, we can't hear you. Okay,
Thank you.
We serve over 1,000 member households throughout the 5 East End towns of Long Island. The Group for the East End submitted comments on the draft scope, and we reviewed the DEIS and will be submitting a detailed comment later at a later date. At this time, but tonight I would like to convey the point that after careful review of the DEIS, we find that there is significant substantive information absent from the report. This prevents you as the planning board as lead agency and us as the public from thoroughly assessing and understanding the potential impacts of this project. The lack of essential information also limits the degree to which we can evaluate and make informed comments on the proposed mitigation measures, which are critical throughout the SECRET process. The intent of SECRET is to assess and mitigate environmental impacts in a transparent manner with robust public disclosure and public participation. This is not possible without the substantial missing information. And I just want to go through with you a few of the points that we had pointed out. For instance, the project assumes a hookup to the village's sewage treatment plant. However, the sewer capacity analysis, to my knowledge, and as noted in the DEIS, has not been completed. And the DEIS is absent and details any discussion of how the sanitary wastewater would be handled if a hookup is not possible or cannot accommodate the amount of wastewater the project is proposing to generate. These details are essential given the fact that the proposed wastewater generation is over 20 times what's permitted per the Suffolk County Department of Health Services. The second big information gap, as we pointed out, is that geotechnical soil borings are set to take place according to the DEIS to help decide the construction methods and the pilings that will be needed, which may or may not require a dewatering process. These details were not in the DEIS, and simply stating that the DEC or another agency will handle this aspect of it does not fully explain nor mitigate the unavoidable impacts of a potential dewatering operation at the site, and you should understand those details. The other big ticket item was very little detail was given regarding the structure and the nature of funding, the eligibility, and the long-term assurance of affordability of the affordable housing units proposed. Again, simply stating that some number of units will be affordable, but giving very little detail pertaining to the methods of assurance is just unacceptable. Given the substantial increase in density above what's permitted, again, 5 units are permitted and 48 are proposed, it's incumbent on the lead agency to ensure that the public benefit, these affordable units, are at least equal to or greater than the impacts caused by this substantial increase in density. And at this time, given those details, it's not possible to make that determination. These are just some of the larger issues, and I will submit again the detailed comment letter that describes other issues related to drainage structures being located less than a half of feet from groundwater levels that will be impacted by rising water levels in the near future. Again, the drastic increase in density, the construction of the site in the hazard flood zone. So given the substantial gaps in information that we believe hinder the ability to assess this project, it would be improper to close the DEIS review at this point. And deal with these data gaps in the FEIS stage, which was discussed and proposed to you at the last hearing. SECRET doesn't require a public hearing during the FEIS stage. In fact, the New York State Secret Handbook states that, and I quote, "A hearing on a final EIS would actually run counter to the intent of SECRET, in that a final EIS is intended to serve as the conclusion of the lead agency's environmental review of the proposed project," end quote. So I would like to reiterate that the missing details and information are not ministerial in nature at all, and they deserve public disclosure and further analysis. With that being said, given the proposed project represents such a substantial increase in intensity of the use of the site and has a complex history of contamination, as you all well know, and ongoing remediation, we implore you to keep the DEIS hearing open at this point and require submission of additional details in the form of an addendum to the DEIS, so this process continue to be evaluated in a transparent manner with meaningful opportunity for public comment. Thank you for the opportunity to comment, and we look further to participating in the review of this project. Thank you.
Thank you. You mentioned that you were intended to, I'm sorry, you mentioned that you intended to submit something in writing at a later date.
Yes.
There is a deadline for that. If we were to close this today, for example, for verbal comments, there's the deadline, and I'm forgetting, John Ellsworth is, I believe, on the Zoom. So we,
It's in the last resolution.
It's the last Friday in June.
Yes, June 27th,
June 27th, which is,
a month from today.
it's a month, yeah, right.
Okay, so I appreciate you giving me that date, and again, just to reiterate, I think that without all of the additional details coming in, that you should not close the public comment period on June 28th without giving the public the advantage of reviewing further information related to a lot of these details.
I hear what you're saying.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you. Would you like to come up and speak?
Hi, everyone. My name's Susie Ellender, and I reside at 18 Ridge Street, which is right across the street from this proposed development.
Speak up just a little bit,
Oh,
please.
sure. Okay. I apologize, I wasn't able to be here last time because this means a lot to me, based on the location of my condo units. I'm on the board over there, and it's a very significant part of my life because it's so quiet and calm. And so the idea that this development would happen is a little bit daunting beyond anything I can imagine. The last DEIS was far clearer to me. I sent a letter to you guys and also to the Conservation of New York. I can't exactly remember the agency that we were requested to send that information to.
That might have been the VEC, perhaps.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So it was very easy to go through that last DEIS document. It was very clear, very concise. This, I was absolutely blindsided by this. I couldn't even follow it. And there were a couple of things, tiny things that I could mention, but basically the whole thing felt like, I think it was AI, frankly. I mean, it felt to me like nobody wrote it that was in a human voice. It was absolutely jargon filled and difficult to follow. I mean, certain things like they called for a certificate of appropriateness in terms of the historical the way that it might fit in with the town, decidedly appropriate, it was declared. There were parks and recreational services, no significant adverse impacts are anticipated. I mean, this kind of language is not human, and for me, it felt so different from the other document, which had been really poured over and was very specific and clear. There was one other, many other things, but I'm talking about construction between 8 AM and 7 PM. I mean, these kinds of details are really, really insurmountable, frankly. I mean, so I guess I have more of a question about what do I do next? Do I literally go through the entire document the way I did the other one and make comments?
Well, if I can help, I'll try to help you a little bit. The DEI and SECRA is specifically about environmental impacts, and that can be anything. It could be, of course, chemical contamination, but it can also be noise or visual or traffic. So it's different ways of looking at how it impacts the world, and you live in the condo next door, I think. So that would be an impact on you folks, I guess, with construction. So that's an issue with traffic and how traffic is handled. So those are the things to look for. I'm trying to help you look for the right kind of things that would be impact on in this conversation.
The last time it was the same sorts of things that I pointed out and that were pointed out, but as I say, I'm not sure because this entire document feels so.
It's very technical.
It's very technical. She's right.
It's
Yeah,
supposed to be.
yeah. It is technical.
But does technical include things like construction between 8 AM and 7 PM? I
It
mean,
addresses a lot, every potential environmental impact from the project. That's the idea of the environmental impact statements.
Right.
in terms of trying to respond to it, I would have to then go into each and every one of these kinds of details.
Yeah, but just to help you out a little bit, this is specifically a review and discussion about SECRA and environmental issues.
Right.
There will be other conversations going forward, site plan review, for example, and the zoning board would have things to say, and the ARB would have things to say. So I know this is technical and it's a little bit daunting, but that's very specifically what we're looking for right now.
Yes, it's technical, but it's also gibberish, frankly. It doesn't feel like English to me.
Okay.
That's where I get the AI. Suddenly I was on the phone with a friend yesterday talking about AI and I suddenly thought, oh my God, the reason why I can't read this thing is because it's written by AI. Just one theory.
Well, thank you for your comments. Thank you for coming in. Ma'am, sure, come on up.
Hello,
Hello.
my name's Ruby Jackson. I live on Peninsula Drive, Sag Harbor. I've lived here for over 40 years. And you don't need no documents to know this is a totally inappropriate plan in a totally inappropriate place. I was in Sag Harbor on Thursday, Memorial Day weekend. The floods had just receded. There is no parking. You don't need to be any kind of genius to see this place does not need or can stand any more development. Environmentally, every report over all these years has come back with great detail of why this is a very bad idea. So for me to see that this idea that is totally horrible and nobody wants it is back, except for him and his lawyer, batted around year after year is ludicrous. You've got to know when your cup is full and you really got to know when it's overflowing. So thank you very much. May I also say, it's very awkward. You have my back to everybody, but so excuse my back, but thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, people shouldn't clap because it could quell speech from the other side, so please don't clap. Okay, thank you.
Fair enough. Thank you for that. Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to speak? Come on up. And just to those who are online, I know there are some people online, so I haven't forgotten about you either. So, hi.
Hi, how are you? My name is Chris Cobb. I live at 55 Hampton Street. I'm the treasurer of the Sag Harbor Historical Museum, and I'd like to read a statement on behalf of the museum. The Board of Trustees of the Sag Harbor Historical Museum strongly oppose the large mixed-use commercial and residential plotted development proposal in the Bridge Street area of Sag Harbor Village. First and foremost, our objection is to demolishing any historic building in the village. In this case, number 7 Bridge Street, a single-story wood-framed house of mid-19th century construction, considered eligible for landmark listing in 2019 in the intensive level historic resource survey of the incorporated village of Sag Harbor. The status that the village enjoys as a certified local government under the State Historic Preservation Office would be severely jeopardized if demolition of the historic building is approved. Of additional concern is the detrimental visual impact of the proposed development scheme and the existing Sag Harbor Village Historic District. Not only will the designated houses on Rose Street be visually compromised by the development, which is proposed for construction on land immediately to the north, but the heart of the commercial district, which preserves dozens of listed historic buildings, will also be visually impaired. The scale of this mixed-use commercial and residential development scheme is simply too large and incompatible with the historic character of the village, which has been protected by the Historic Preservation and Architectural Review Board since formation of the historic district over 50 years ago. The Sag Harbor Historical Museum urges the Village Planning Board to reject the Bridge Street development proposal as being destructive to the fabric of the village and incompatible with the scale and character of our village.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Sir, are you going to be sending that in letter form as well?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Please come on up.
I have copies. Would you like a copy?
Sure.
Okay.
And I'll need your name and
Sure.
please, thank you.
Like to answer you.
I think Doris needs one.
I can split this after I read it.
Thanks.
Good evening, board. I'm Angela Zmerlo. I live at 10 Ackerley Street. I've been a resident at 10 Ackerley since 2013. I've been a resident in Sag Harbor since 2000. And I too am also a member of the Sag Harbor Historical Museum Society.
Okay.
So I'll just read what I wrote this letter a year ago. I don't know if it was read into the record, but I'll read it. I made a little variation on it now.
Okay.
Since the development has continued to move forward. Dear Sag Harbor Village members, people are motivated in different and various ways, all hopefully with the best of intentions. As farmers, we love farming. Artists, we love craft. Engineers appreciate mechanics. But what motivates an estate developer? Is that the true intention for a local community? Sag Harbor Village is unique and special for so many reasons. One being the scale of our local architecture. And Mr. Potter's plan proposes to demolish 3 to 4 historic structures. Approving this plan erases Sag Harbor's history. It is unconscionable to think that we would contemplate to ruin our own village by choice. It's not easy to plan, relocate, restore, preserve, repair, or replace in kind any structure from the 1700s to the 1900s of historical significance. As a board member of the Sag Harbor Historical Museum, I object to the demolition and the amount of, I'm sorry, and the amount of consecutive contributing historical structures, because that road makes up a significant amount of historical buildings. Mr. Potter's development is not only in a flood zone, he is requesting significant amount of non-pervious surfaces and septic challenges, not to mention parking. And consider the amount and extent of variances requested by Mr. Potter. Variances are reserved as a last resort if every other option to conform with the village code has been exhausted. I'm sorry, to repeat the question on behalf of our board, is the applicant applying for the variance because the variance request is self-created and therefore can be avoided? This development is not the solution in the short nor long term and would set a dangerous precedent going forward. We have too few historic structures in our village of Sag Harbor. Every last one is to be revered. Once a historic structure is demolished, it will never come back. The village must protect its history in the form of honoring its code. Solving the affordable housing issue is a complex matter on many levels, and obviously is possible with ingenuity and resolve. Respectfully submitted, Angela Zola.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. I heard you say you wrote that a year ago or so. Things, I just want to point this for a little clarity. You mentioned multiple buildings would be demolished, and a year ago that was true. Now I think it's down to one now. Historic structure, that's a 7.
Any historic structure.
Understood, but I wanted to say that so people, everyone understood that. Fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Yep. Sir in the back, and then over here. Hello.
My name is Henry Birdsall. I'm the president of Harbor Close. I live across the street from this project. Just like to mention a couple of things about the road. I don't hear anyone talk about the road. I physically measured it today from my property line, and again, these property lines may not be true. But I took where the railroad ties are for Harbor Close, walked across the street up to the grass area where the white fence is. It measures 27 feet. An automobile width, I measured that, it's around 9 feet, 8.5. Again, I'm off maybe a foot, 2 feet, but just get you an idea. So a car is 9 feet, 27, that means it's 18 feet wide, the road. It's a two-way road. So if you have 2 cars going by, plus the parked car, then it makes 27 feet. So I'm off by a couple of feet probably because they do pass. That's the first issue I have. Road is very narrow. There's no sidewalks, which means we haven't talked about sidewalks coming in. Whose property are you going to take? Some of the Harbor Close, some across the street. I don't know. There's not much. The buildings that are there now on the east side, the foundation, from that foundation of the long building to the street, it's about 9 feet. So there's, you get a driveway. But if you look to the north and to the south, you'll see that 9 feet piece of parcel, which is by that one building, it will not, you'll go right past over the porch of that historical home. So apparently, when that historical home goes away, you'll get probably your driveway or your sidewalk on one side of the street, but not both. Also, you'll notice over the weekend, like today, you'd see, it's amazing how many people walk that street without a sidewalk. So you gotta put a sidewalk in.
Yep.
I'm very concerned about the safety because now you're gonna introduce, basically right now, it's cars going back and forth. But most of these box trucks go out the north, the south side, so they're not coming down bridge very far. So now you got a box truck. Now, why is a box truck? What I'm indicating is there's not, that road, I assume is adequate to take care of all this that's gonna go on. But I don't see how you can leave the road the width it is now and be able to put a car parking on the side of the street and a car going through, it's gonna be tight. So, which means they're gonna be very close to the sidewalk, which means people on the sidewalk gotta be careful.
Right.
The other issue I'd like to talk about just briefly is water.
Hmm.
I mentioned it last time I was here. If you look at our drains in our parking lots, the water, not today, do it maybe in August. You'll see how high the water level is. Well, I'm not telling you anything new because you have a sign across the street saying flood zone. So the town's very much aware of it and we see the cones that come out, which indicates also, if you don't correct that, the flooding, as it does right now, instead of having 27 feet of drivable space, you got a car, so now it's 18, that space, then there's huge puddles. So what happens? You lose another lane, so now you got about 9 foot, so it's a single, a lot of times you'll see one car wait for you. Again, I don't know what the legal requirements are for a width of a road, but let me tell you, it's very tight over there, okay? And the other question is just the water issue. I don't know how you're gonna resolve the water issue since our unit or our complex was built 3 feet higher than the ground because of this issue. You start building a piece of property across the way, 3 feet high, now you're gonna have a channel. Now, where's the water draining? I don't know how you're gonna get up because the pump down here on one end and the pump on the other end doesn't seem to be able to take the water normally. Now you're gonna introduce more cement service, brick service, asphalt services, which doesn't drain the water in. Water's gonna sit somewhere, it's gonna sit on top. It's gonna have a little river going down there. So that's what I'd like to say.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Bragman, sure.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members. My name is Jeff Beck and I represent Save Harbor. For this return of engagement in front of the board. I just got in materials today, which I believe the planning board just got today from the zoning board. There was a memo in which the zoning board detailed deficiencies in proof basically and asked for more information. I came in prepared in part to talk about gaps in the information that the applicant has provided so far. I'm prepared to defer those comments if the board is inclined to continue this and so that it can evaluate the suggestions of the zoning board. I don't know what your intentions are, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm prepared to make some remarks about your legal responsibilities in terms of planning and also in terms of segmenting your review, separating your review from the review of other boards, which is not permitted under secret. My point being that the comments coming in from the zoning board are relevant to your consideration because ultimately, although they're a decision-making board like you still are the lead agency, and before they can decide, you have to take into account potential significant impacts that the variances might occasion in this application. So it would seem to me that you would want some time to look that over and come to your own conclusions about whether or not that information is needed. I mean, I can proceed now. I also wanted to talk to you today about the timing because it seems to be coming up as like this deadline that's looming. And in fact, it is not a looming deadline because the planning board has every right to continue these proceedings as long as you need to get the information that you need. And this relates to the comments that group for the East End made, that this isn't just a formality and saying, well, we don't want you to close and go into the final environmental impact statement section of the review because it's a formality. It's because it likely will close out public observation of what you're doing and public comment on what you're doing. So I think the ZBA resolution is an example of a situation in which you have to deal with this issue of segmentation, which is what it's called. And also, I wanted to remind you that the timing's not a problem here. The court, and I was a little concerned because your consultant on SECRA made a comment to me that was very unusual for a DEIS to go beyond one hearing. And that is not the case. It's actually very typical that planning board review of a DEIS continues over one or two or three or many hearings. And in fact, there's case law even cited in the SECRA handbook. I'm not going to give you the full cites, but there's 3 citations in the SECRA handbook. Fragalt versus Town of Richfield, Friends of Shawangunks versus ZBA, Long Island Lighting versus Town of Babylon. And in all of them, the courts cite as good practice planning boards that adjourn the case to allow public comment and to allow a thorough discourse on the issues. And it seems, I actually expected to hear the board say, we're gonna adjourn this, so that we can have a chance to review it. I think you just got it today as well.
We just got it, yeah.
So it seemed, having been on the other
Just
side.
Mr. Bragman, please make one comment, if that would be that way to proceed,
Okay.
rather than looking for an answer from the board.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyway, the law is clear that the last date for public comment can be extended to the extent that you need information. And when I last spoke, I talked about the substance of some of the problems, the environmental problems, and today I'm going to talk more about the procedure. SECRA prohibits segmentation. Segmentation means dividing up an action, and action is an application, into individual parts as if they got separate review. What the concept is that actions or applications commonly consist of a series of steps. It's never, only one approval. It often involves many approvals by different boards. Nonetheless, no matter which board has to make the decision, and here there are other boards that will have to make decisions, the Suffolk County Health Department will, the ZBA will, Harbor Committee may, the village board may. Whether or not another agency is making the decision, this board, as the lead agency, must review the entire application. That means that just because the zoning board is ultimately going to be the decision maker on variances, you still have to look yourselves at the evidence and whether you think it's adequate or whether the evidence or lack of evidence suggests that there are problems with the variances that are in front of the zoning board. And that's why I think you may need more time to look at what the zoning board is asking for. So the involvement of another agency does not relieve your responsibility or your authority from looking over what they're doing. And in this case, it's particularly significant because the DEC, the Department of Environmental Conservation, is involved with a potential work plan for further remediation on the site. And what I suggested the last time I was in front of you was that you can't let the applicant say, well, that's out of your realm and the DEC is going to take care of it and everything's going to be fine. That's an applicant subtly suggesting and trying to convince you that it's a good idea to segment this application. It's against the purposes of SECRA, and it's enunciated in their procedures, in their procedural requirements. It says it's contrary to the intent of SECRA. And SECRA is your most powerful tool here to figure out what's going on. So when I say that you don't have enough information on some of those aspects, that detracts from your ability to make a decision in this case. Because an EIS has to take into account the entire set of activities, and it has to look at the entire steps that are required with a level of detail that's sufficient for adequate analysis of the significant potential environmental impacts and excluding associated project impacts in this way by saying, oh, the DC is going to take care of that, we don't need to know about it, tends to make the application look more acceptable, because the drafters of the code understood that almost any project could look, you know, like it was environmentally sensitive if you separate out some of the consequences from it. So this talk about missing aspects in the DEIS are very significant, not only to you, but to us as members of the public, because we want to be able to look at answers. You know, you had another person stand up and say, oh, it's a bunch of gobbledygook, it's like it's written by AI. Well, in many ways, the DEIS does not answer the questions that were posed to it in your outline of issues, in your scoping, doesn't answer them. And the test of segmentation, I'll go through this quickly, is whether or not the steps have a common purpose or goal. Obviously, the variances in this case are absolutely essential to this application. So it's they have a united purpose. The same is true of the DEC and the examination it's going to do with the remedial action plan. That's critical information. You can't know what the potential impacts are without supervising that in some way, or at least having that information in front of you. You don't have it. Another aspect, another criterion for segmentation is the timing of them. Are the steps related in time? And obviously here, they're completely related in time. The ZBA has to act, the DEC has to act, you have to act, the Harbor Committee has to act. They're all united in time for one purpose, to get this project over the finish line. Another thing is location. Do the various steps occupy the same location geographically? Obviously, the answer here is yes. Everything they're doing is on this one site. And another criterion is, what are the impacts? Are the impacts related? Again, of course they're related. If the ZBA is looking at variances that, you know, blast through your limits on the number of housing units, and setbacks and the size of the building, obviously that impact is directly related to the project they're trying to get across the finish line. And most significantly is a common plan. Is there a common plan that's evidenced in the record? Again, of course there is. You know what they want. They want 28 units of market value units and 16 units of so-called affordable units. The other thing is, are they functionally related? Yes, all the steps here are functionally related. And finally does approval of one phase, is that an inducement to approve the entire project? Again, especially with the zoning board, that's like a stop sign. They're either gonna stop or go on that. So this, when you hear us coming in front of you saying, we lack information, this is important for you and your ability to do what you have to do. And I would suggest that taking the additional time so that you can, you know, read what you need to read is very important. I've been on the other side of this podium, and it's very difficult when, you know, you have a big 300-page report and, you know, somebody says, well, and you get a 5-page memo or a 3-page memo from the zoning board, and they say, well, what do you think? And no one knows what to say on the spot. That's why boards take time. That's why SECRET is built, to give you time to decide, because environmental issues are more important than coming in fast to the finish line. They know that that's not a good plan. There are so many unknowns here. The sewage management issue is completely unknown to you. You don't know the capacity of the system going forward. You don't know prior commitments. We've heard talk about it, but you have nothing on paper that's, you know, factually verifiable. You don't know the percentage increase that this project is going to take. You don't know whether it should be considered infill or new construction. This is an argument they made in the DEIS. Oh, we're just infill, doesn't matter. You got to know this. Planning means know before you go. It doesn't mean guess and figure it out later. You don't have that right to do that, and you have a responsibility not to do it. This is one of the biggest projects that Sag Harbor's faced in, you know, the last 15 years. It requires a little time. You also need the sewage master plan. Haven't taken a look at that. It's not your fault. It hasn't been given to you. You don't know anything about the remedial action plan that they're going in front of the DEC for. We don't know what the outcome's gonna be there. And two of the issues that are related to that are extremely critical in this case. One is dewatering the site, and the other is pile driving. Both of those issues directly impact groundwater quality and the potential dissemination of contaminants into the groundwater. Because if you dewater, you're pulling water out of the ground through the peat layer. And there's a risk that you're gonna disseminate the contamination when you drive piles. That was one of the risks in the prior brownfield work that was done. The reason they stopped it is because they knew they were near the peat layer that separated near the ground level from the groundwater. And they didn't want to start penetrating the peat layer because they thought that would cause interaction in the groundwater, pull up groundwater and disseminate, disperse it. So the significance of those two things are tremendously important. Do you have the information? No. So why should you be looking at a June 27th deadline on a project of this size, probably the biggest in 15 years at least, and not knowing the answers to these things? You know what happens to applicants if you don't know the answers? Or what should happen? The board says, sorry, we're not gonna give you permission to do this because you haven't answered. They haven't answered these issues. And what I'm trying to suggest is that procedurally, you have mechanisms so that you can do something about it. Same thing with historic impacts. There are a couple of people talking about tearing down the building. What was their explanation or their excuse, or I don't know what you'd call it, was, we'll document the building. Well, that isn't remediation, that isn't an explanation of why they can't remediate. There's just nothing there. There's no there. And and your local law is absolutely clear that this is a contributing property in the historic district. It's absolutely clear it can't be demolished and it can't be removed from the site. So you don't have an answer to that. That's not the way it's supposed to work. I mentioned the policies of the office district and how some of the policies are that it's supposed to be a transition in size between commercial and village business density and small scale residential development. They have no explanation, no discussion of that. Like how does this, I think it's 8,700 square foot building, how does that fit those standards? No explanation is there. It's just not there. I'm sorry, it's 8,576. I was close. No discussion of the expansive footprint. I mentioned the last time I was here, they're up at like 67.8% of their coverage. That's 2% less than the maximum coverage on this site, which is less than an acre, I think, is that from memory I'm saying, in a 100-year flood zone, and they're spreading out their footprint and covering 67.8% of the property. Same lack of information on the tidal flood hazard requirements. Base flood elevation 6 feet, that's the one remedy in these flood districts that's at least partially effective is you raise the building up. They're not gonna do it. They just go, we're not gonna do it, but we're gonna give you 8 feet of waterproofing. Well, what's waterproofing? Nobody knows. Crickets. You don't have any information on this. You're entitled to say, we don't have this information, we want more information. You're also entitled to say, hey, we just got a document today, we need to think about it. Anyone would need to think about it, an engineer would, a lawyer would, anybody. Doesn't matter how experienced you are. And in addition, there are extra requirements to get a variance, which that would require in the flood hazard overlay district. And those extra requirements specify that they have to show exceptional hardship. When you balance that against the variances that they're asking for, it's a little difficult to say that they have exceptional hardship because they're creating it themselves. Why? Because the building is enormous for the site. It's too large for the site. And when the building doesn't fit the site, well, what does an ambitious applicant do? They try to make the site fit the building by getting variances. That doesn't add up to exceptional hardship that's required in a flood zone. They also have to prove that a variance would not create any additional threat to health and safety in a flood zone. Have they done that? Is there any explanation in the DEIS? None that I could see. And their rationale for asking for this kind of relief was that the requested variances are to achieve desirable residential density with a commercial component. I can translate that for you. That sentence, it means I want it. That's what it means. It doesn't provide a rationale. Is floodproofing or remediation? Who knows? What about seepage through doors and windows? Does that sound like it's gonna do the job of elevating to base flood? It won't. They also ignore the fact that they've only got a 6-inch separation of drainage from containment from groundwater, only 3 soil borings, each of them ranging from 21 inches to 22 to 28 inches below grade. That's how shallow the depth of groundwater is here, and they want to put a massive building on site. I mentioned before, they only studied a rainfall of 2 inches. SEQRA requires an applicant to take into account global climate warming, climate change, and it requires that the evaluation be done at a level of detail that reflects the severity and reasonable likelihood of those occurrences. And climate change must be considered under SEQRA, and it includes explicitly the associated impacts of increased precipitation. Any information in the DEIS about the increase in precipitation? Most jurisdictions demand applicants deal with a 5-inch rainstorm because everybody knows the rains are getting more intense. Is it there? No, there's no information, none. And they knew when they wrote the code, when they wrote the DEIS, they understood that they only had 6 inches of separation between their water containment and groundwater. So, anticipating a 2-inch rainfall probably makes them look a little better. That's not enough. And you have the right to tell them, that's not enough. We want 5 inches of calculation here. Also, they don't seem to be on the scale of the development. And what they say to you in the DEIS is, and I'm quoting, the redevelopment of the site with a minor increase in impervious areas, a minor increase would not significantly exacerbate existing flooding issues with the village, nor would it significantly change surface runoff. I don't know, is there any evidence of that? No, this is a conclusion by an applicant that wants what he wants. A category 1 storm would bring in 3 inches of storm surge, 3 inches, they've got 6 inches between their containment and groundwater. A Cat 4 storm would cause up to 9 inches of storm surge. Sandy was a category 1, but we got lucky with Sandy because the moon wasn't in the right place, and when it hit here and the tides weren't, the timing made it less damaging. But also, and I know, and most of the lay public knows, that global warming, arises in groundwater. And that's a serious problem here when groundwater is so shallow. Do you have an answer to that? No, no answer. What's the DEIS response? It concedes either a category 1 or category 4 storm would inundate the site. That's what they tell you. Well, is there any attempt to mitigate? No. Is there any attempt to craft an application that's smaller, that might have less runoff? No, they want what they want. There's no restraint that results in the plan. And sea level rise may go to 12 inches or 24 inches. And they acknowledge that a 10% storm, not a 100-year storm, but a 10% storm would impact the entire property. And there's no answer to that. Common sense suggests a smaller project, greater conformity to zoning would reduce the impacts. And when you get, this is hopefully will be an issue in front of the zoning board, but they're gonna wanna hear from you as a planning board in response to their memo. I mean, if they're saying, we need a better one of the things they said, and I only had a chance to read it today an hour ago, is, well, we need a better explanation of why you want like a massive increase in the density on this site. Well, you might want to have that answer too, since you're the lead agency. That means more time is required. More time is required for you to even look over that document. But 28 units versus 5, maximum size use, 57% variance in the rear yard, 3-story building. And by the way, the zoning board said, hey, when you talk 3 stories, you can't just point to other sites. Let us know which ones were rebuilding existing buildings, because some of the cases they cited that they're relying on were not comparable to what's going on here. This is brand new construction. On-site parking is impossible to meet. You don't have to guess at that. We know it. They gotta put it off-site. That shows that the site is inadequate for the purposes that they have in mind. And that's relevant to your considerations on whether or not they're gonna cause an impact.
Mr. Bregman, if you can bring it to a conclusion.
You always interrupt exactly at the right.
Well, lucky me.
No, no, no.
Okay, thank you.
I am largely done. I just wanted to mention the special exception
Thank you.
requirements, because they require that lot area be sufficient, appropriate, and adequate for the use. Doesn't sound like that's what's going on here. And it also says, will the proposal prevent the orderly and reasonable use of the adjacent property? Well, not if demolishing a building on the adjacent property is okay, but if it's not, yeah, that doesn't sound like they need that either. And it also says the planning board will require greater parking in excess of the requirements, because it's understood that these special exception uses need less. So I would urge you to take more time. I would urge you to please keep the record open, not worry about the June 27th deadline. At a minimum, we as the public should be able to hear your reaction to the ZBA memo, because that will help us. And we're entitled, I don't think most of the people in the audience have seen that memo, and they should have an opportunity to hear what you have to say about it and comment on it. And frankly, if the applicant chooses to come up with any further information, we want to be heard on that as well. So I would again say, June 27th is not hard and fast. Remember, the time limits are voluntary, not mandatory. They're suggestions, not mandatory.
We hear you. Thank you. Thank you. And if we could try, I appreciate the applause. Try to keep that, your hands down so you don't applaud. I mean, I appreciate you applauding, but please do not. Yeah. There are other people online who have been patiently waiting. So, Doris, if there's anyone online that's still waiting to,
No hands.
um,
Any hand, John.
no one? Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who wants to speak still? Come on up. And Barbara, let me just note, Barbara, that Larry Perrine just had to leave, so just take note of that. Okay. Hello.
Peter Ganay, 165 Division Street. I'm also a member of Sag Harbor. I just want to add one more thing to the long list of unknown unknowns.
I'm sorry, can you repeat your name?
Peter Ganay, G-I-N-N-A. That Jeff Bragman and others have raised. Specifically, in the last, after the last meeting, the applicant sent in or supplied an amendment to the environmental easement on 7 Bridge. And which had previously, that was an easement that was created at the time of the site management plan for the toxic brownfield for the oil gas ball lot. And that site had been, under the easement, had been restricted. No residential use was permitted on that site under the previous easement. And they've now supplied it from the DEC has sent in a letter or has revised the easement, saying that they've changed the easement to now allow restricted residential on this. It says this amendment to environmental easement is filed solely in order to correct the use restrictions recited in the previous easement agreement. There's no explanation from the DEC and why they decided all of a sudden that this site, which was known to have toxic contaminants on it, was now permissible for residential uses when it had been deemed otherwise before. I think it's very important for the board to ask the DEC on what basis that decision was changed. Corrected is an interesting word for them to use. Is there correspondence? What information was supplied to the DEC to make them revise that judgment? And that's another piece of information I think that both you and the public need to have and you're feeling that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience or online who would like to speak on this topic? It looks like there's no one raising their hand. John Ellsworth, are you still with us? I hope.
I am.
Hello, John.
Although,
For those in the audience, or those listening online, John Ellsworth is sort of the SECRA guy for Nelson Pope Voorhis, and he's been very useful for us in guiding us through the process of SECRA on this application. John, maybe I should have introduced you earlier to the audience. Is there anything you want to say now, or how you want to guide us going forward at this point?
well, I think the big question for the board to contemplate is the request to extend the deadline for the receipt of comments. That's currently set at June 27th. But keep in mind that the seeker regulations specifically establish a procedure to answer these questions. It's the final environmental impact statement. So the board doesn't have to answer questions at this point in the process. That can be and should be done in the FEIS. So ultimately, the public comment period should close at some point. And then all of the comments that have been received will go through analysis at that point, and full detailed responses will be provided in the FEIS.
John, we've spoken about this before in this setting. Some of the issues that people have brought up today, we brought up prior. Sewer flow issues, boring issues, dewatering issues. These are all things that the applicant has said they will be coming back to us with more information. Walk me through, if you walk us all through, how we would handle that information coming from the applicant to us at the planning board, and how would we handle it in this FEIS process?
So typically, and I think it will be the case for this application, the applicant prepares preliminary responses to all the comments. But at the end of the day, it's the planning board that is responsible for the FEIS. So if you don't like their responses, you can turn it back to them to come up with a better response, or you can prepare the response yourself. So once the public comment period is closed, the first step is to compile all the comments that have been received and to categorize them so that it's clear what the questions are that have to be answered in the FEIS. So the first step is to, if the board keeps the June 27th date as the end of the public comment period, once June 27th passes, we would collect all of the comments that have been received, and they would be gone through and basically bracket out, okay, here's a comment, here's another individual comment, and each of those would receive a response in the FEIS. I hope that makes it clearer what the process is moving forward, assuming that the board is ready to move forward with the FEIS. You could keep the comment period open, but that presumes that we'll get different new updated comments as compared to what we've heard today.
I guess, John, maybe a part of the disconnect, maybe you could clarify the difference between kind of the procedural side and the requirement, because I think some of the points that were made were if there are gaps in information and we're closing the DEIS and there's no further public comments on an FEIS, where can that new information be addressed?
So a lot of the issues that were raised are typical questions that are resolved in an FEIS. There is, when the if we move forward with the FEIS, that is issued for public review and consideration in the same manner as the DEIS was. So there would be the opportunity for people to review the FEIS and to submit comments. It's a public review process. The seeker regulations in the handbook don't have a specific procedure for how to deal with comments on the FEIS, but it's not specifically precluded under seeker because the document is issued to the public for review. So those comments that came in on the FEIS, at that point, we would see what the comments are. If they are new comments that were not properly addressed previously in the process, seeker has a procedure for dealing with those with the additional review and analysis. But if the board is satisfied at the content of the FEIS after the back and forth with the applicant and the board's own responses to comments, you would, the next step in the process is to prepare a finding statement, which basically synthesizes the information in the DEIS and the FEIS and provides a conclusion essentially as to whether the project is approvable based on the impacts and the mitigation that's provided and the balance against any of the benefits that the project may offer. So you're not locked into it. It seems like everybody's saying if we go through the process, you're locked into a certain outcome. The process provides you with the information to arrive at your conclusion about this project based on environmental considerations. And it can go in one of two ways. So always keep that in mind, that this process ultimately will provide you with information on whether the impacts are adequately mitigated and whether the benefits of the project outweigh the impacts, particularly the unmitigated impacts.
I just have a question about whose burden is it to address all of the questions that seem to be lacking in the draft environmental impact statement?
Initially, if the board decides to proceed with the FEIS, initially the comments will be compiled and the applicant will be requested to prepare preliminary responses because they are doing some of these additional analyses. So it makes sense for them to provide the initial response. But we and you, the board, will review whatever they submit and see whether you're satisfied with their responses, if they need to do further study, or if you disagree with the information that they're providing. And you can come to your own conclusions in the FEIS, because again, whereas the DEIS was the applicant's document and it went through what's known as a completeness review, just checking it against the final scope, the FEIS is this board's own document. So you're in complete control over the FEIS. So regardless of what the applicant submits, this board will have the final say over the content of the FEIS.
John, is there a deadline of any sort to produce an FEIS?
there is not a deadline. And as Mr. Bragman said, if you believe that it would be worthwhile to continue the hearing on the DEIS, you can do that. There's no restriction on that. And there are timeframes after the FEIS is issued with regard to when the findings should be prepared. But again, that's advisory. So if you need, if you do go proceed with the FEIS and you accept it, there's a time frame, I don't know it off the top of my head, to prepare the finding statement, but you, if you need to take more time than is specified in the seeker regulations, ultimately, that's the most important thing, is to get the finding statement right.
What I'm trying to,
John, we haven't heard from Harbor Committee.
Right.
That's the one thing. You did present that to them, you introduced it to them, but we have to, based on their feedback, get comments to the board. And could you also address like the comments from ZBA? Maybe Mr. Bragman said that this board has an obligation to sort of, you know, debate them or talk about them, and that's really not the case. Those are comments to this board about what's lacking or what they'd like answered in the FEIS, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. It's not, you know, something.
Right.
And the big question I have
Additional
was
comments to
the
be addressed.
sewer use. When are we gonna have that answered? That's a big piece.
Oh, Tiffany,
um,
address
Let me
that.
address the sewer usage.
come on up to the podium. Was,
I think it would have to be in the FEIS,
Right.
is my understanding.
hello, Tiffany Scarlato, attorney for the applicant.
The applicant, 36 West Warren Street, Suite 202. Just to address the sewer use issue, an application was made to the village more than a year ago under the existing village code, which does not give any specificity to allocation. It is a general sewer use permit that was applied for more than a year ago. We're still waiting for a response. So while everyone sits and says, we don't have an answer to the sewer issue, it's sitting on someone's desk downstairs. Now, I've written 3 letters, I've requested an answer. I know the village code recently changed with respect to how it's processed, but we're still more than a year out from that initial request for which capacity still hasn't been answered. So I don't want to hear it come back at me every meeting, where is the sewer, where is the sewer? Village, where is the sewer request?
If I can ask you a question, since you're here and we're talking about information that's missing, you've heard spoken tonight, boring information, and we've spoken about this before, so this is none of this is new to you. Dewatering information, and we said, and I think you may have presented or said that at some point that information will come, and then we can be.
Those will all come as the next part of it. Once we have all the comments compiled and those answers to those comments, you'll receive a lot more of that information. Some of those studies are being done even as recently as this past weekend.
I was going to ask you if you have any sense of when we will get some of the knowledge of the things that we don't have information on now.
Well, since we have the comments that indicate that those are still outstanding issues, those outstanding issues will be addressed in our comments.
Okay.
Now, at the FEIS stage. We don't anticipate having that information in the next 30 days, and I would suggest to the board that they not keep that hearing open, because this isn't an open dialogue back and forth. This is only comments on the adequacy of the DEIS and what's in there, not not a back and forth on whether this is the right thing to do, that's the right thing to do. Those conversations come later on in the process.
Okay, thank you. John, and if I can just set, or Liz, in terms of like public commentary going forward, I want to make sure the public has, for whichever course we take, I want to make sure the public has the ability to read, know about, it has to be transparent for everyone and be able to comment on it. And by comment, it could, I think you were indicating, John, that this would be an FEIS, if we were to sort of produce one, that would be made available to the public, but I didn't hear that there would be a public hearing where people could comment in person, or could they?
That's at your discretion. That's not the normal procedure, but I have seen it done before. So this board could, if they decide that there are enough issues that merit a hearing, you could have a hearing on the FEIS.
Okay.
So there was,
You didn't, just for the board's record, you did not have to have a public hearing on the draft EIS according to the handbook. You can, and you did,
Yeah,
and you had two, formal public hearing, 2 dates of a formal public hearing on it, but you didn't have to. You had to have a comment period.
Right.
But not necessarily a hearing.
so it'd be the same procedure for an FEIS. So if we felt there was material, enough information that it would warrant an
Yeah, it
additional
would depend on, I believe, your assessment of that.
of the
Right.
amount of information. Okay.
right, thank you.
And could John also just opine on the segmentation issue, just so that's outlined a little more clearly? That would be helpful.
Yeah, I don't think anybody is suggesting that this board defer to any of the other agencies with regard to its seeker responsibilities. The intent of the FEIS is to answer these questions, such as the memo that was received from the ZBA, so that'll be addressed. The remediation issue, a letter was submitted to the DEC asking for them to weigh in on it. We will follow up with them, but clearly the DEIS had a lot of information about the brownfield cleanup program. And hopefully the DEC will provide comments that will be require a response in the FEIS. But no part of the overall proposed action is being deferred. Everything will be addressed by this board in its FEIS. So I don't know what the suggestion of segmentation is. I've never heard anything like that before.
Okay, so it all comes together under the
Yes.
FEIS. And that would include obviously the response that we just received from zoning, the Harbour Committee response that we're waiting on would be in front of that. Do ARB have to opine on the conforming structure?
They don't have to, but if they do choose to submit comments, that would also be addressed in the FEIS. And all of the comments that are brought up in this hearing and the massive letter that we're anticipating from Mr. Bragman at the end of this, whenever you decide to close the public comment period, all of that will be addressed in the FEIS.
Okay. Well, we're sort of at a juncture where we can decide to go one of two ways. We could, I sort of feel like we have provided significant opportunity for public input. And there will be significant opportunity for public input going forward. And we all are aware, we all understand that there are significant gaps in information still. I don't think any of us are under the illusion that that doesn't exist. And if that information gets adequately presented to us and we can work with it, fine. If it doesn't, then that becomes an important part of what we decide at the end with the FEIS. I don't know. So I don't know how you folks feel about it, but I'd like to hear from you. If you have thoughts.
Yeah, I think there's just a little bit of a discrepancy of understanding of what we're actually voting on is not informing the decision about the overall plan. My understanding is that we're voting on, accepting the draft environmental impact statement. I think we absolutely should have public comment during the FEIS period, because we will need all of this information completely answered at that stage. But you have to listen to what Tiffany's saying as well. I mean, there's certain responses that they can't produce because they're waiting on other people at this point. So
do we have
the FEIS will need all of those responses, and then we'll open it to public comment, and then we'll make a determination on it. So
I'm sorry, on the sewer issue, just keep in mind that no agency can make a decision until the seeker process is completed. So this is like circular reasoning. They want the board to determine whether they can accommodate this project with the wastewater treatment plant, but you can't do that until the seeker process is done. So what the seeker process will do is will crystallize what the issues are to assist in that decision making. I think Mr. Bragman brought it up, or somebody else brought it up. What is the quantity of sewage flow that this project is demanding as compared to what's available at the plant or in the area within which it's located? The DEIS did not really go into that level of detail, but we'll make sure that the FEIS has that information, and that will inform the decision-making about whether it's appropriate for this project as proposed to be connected to the wastewater treatment plant.
I mean, do we have an answer though on availability? Why don't we have an answer on? This is a pretty big part of this application. Sewer use availability.
I don't know the answer to that.
Because obviously if we don't have availability, then it's a different,
Well, if I could just
Um,
heard on that.
Sure.
Because it is an administrative process. It is not a process before any board. There is no discretion involved in the allocation of sewer availability or current sewer capacity pursuant to the village code or any other local law or regulation.
Well,
So
capacity
it's an
is,
administrative process. In
capacity
other
is
words-
finite though, of course, so.
Well, the code simply reads that you submit an application. D Yardley, who is the one that used to review it, reviews the application, makes a simple determination as to whether or not there's capacity, that permit gets issued. There is no discretion involved, not at all in that code.
But there is an answer,
So
which we're waiting for, but there
Right,
is an
I-
answer, yeah.
Why I don't have an answer?
Right.
But
That
Tiffany,
remains a
have
mystery
you
to-
guys submitted application on like flow, like how much?
Absolutely,
You have, okay.
100%.
So you're
That's
just
been
waiting
sitting
on
with
an
the village for a
answer,
year.
okay.
More than a year.
Okay, thank you.
Just a question to John, he says it's.
No, yeah,
waiting, it's just-
yeah, that's, we're not gonna resolve
Yeah.
that particular issue. That's something for the trustees to handle, not. So I don't know, I'm inclined to move forward to close the public comments on this.
The written comment period is still open till June 27th.
For sure,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And cognizant that we are lacking information, and that will be.
But that doesn't
will
sound
inform us.
like that's unusual at this point in proceedings of a DEIS, that there is often information lacking at that point.
Correct.
So this is, again, I mean, to Drew's point, not to conflate issues, this is a procedural step that will allow comments to go out to the applicant to have a detailed response. The board still has the ability to hold future public hearings and to have public comment periods if there's material information, which it sounds like there probably will be,
Right.
based on the pieces that are lacking. And none of that comes into segmentation because it's the FEIS that is the umbrella over that.
Correct.
That, a fair summary?
Yes.
Okay, well then, I think we should move forward. I think I would move to close public comments, public hearing, leaving the written public comments open until a month from now, as we said earlier in the meeting, which is June.
Because this gives us the process for those questions to properly get answered. And unless we close this, we'll never get. Right?
We've asked for these questions, we haven't gotten them. We know what we know a lot of what the questions are, we know what's lacking.
Yeah.
And we know there could be other issues that pop up when we hear the information, so we will go forward with that. Kathy, did you want to say anything to this? I see you're nodding your head.
Nodding, yes.
Okay, okay,
Have it.
okay. Well, then, I would move that we close the public hearing.
I
And
just have one more question.
sure,
There's no requirement of the applicant at this point to address these questions during the DEIS phase of this process. They can hear them, they can provide the answer they provided, but the inadequate, like, if we're not satisfied with the answer, it doesn't matter. They provided their answer. They don't have to keep responding. Just like to make that very clear, correct? It's not their job to respond to all these comments. at this stage.
Yeah, it's not the DEIS went through the completeness review where it was internal, the village, with our assistants reviewed the document just to make it ready for public review. We didn't say we even agreed with the information in the DEIS, just that it addressed everything that was in the scope. They don't have to address these comments now. That's what the FEIS is for. So once the comment period closes, we'll compile all the comments and we'll get to work on the FEIS.
Okay,
Motion to adopt
you make a
the
motion?
DIS.
Okay,
Second.
second. All those in favor?
If I may, it's what the board is considering is closing the public hearing.
Yes.
Right,
You've already set the end date for June 27th, so I don't know that, I'll defer to Liz, I don't know that you have to vote on that, but it's to close the public hearing, I believe. Liz?
Yeah, just close the public hearing with a written comment period ending June 27th, 2025.
June 27th, 2025 would be close of the written comment period.
You would close the.
Public hearing.
Close the public hearing, now.
I'll make the motion.
You making that motion?
Yeah.
I'll second that
Thank you,
motion.
Grania. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay, then we have done that. Thank you. Is there anything else that I'm forgetting to do here? I think that's it. So we need a motion to close the meeting. I'll make a motion to close the meeting. No more questions, I'm sorry. All those, thank you, Drew. All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you.
Take care. Good night, everyone.